Sitting alone in the den, watching the eel. Help me find my way home, watching the eel. Arrows its head in the sand, daylight has come. There shall be rest in a while, daylight has come.
Oh, here we fucking go! Darksiders 1 was a pretty successful game given the time and the reception. Say what you will about aggregates or professional publication scores, they all seem to come to the same conclusion. That it was pretty good. Most people praised it for being a mixture of God of War, Devil May Cry, and Legend of Zelda, which I criticized it for using absolutely none of those elements well. But my opinion is mostly meaningless when it comes to the walleted masses, as the game appears to have sold well enough to not warrant being buried in the fucking desert, which I can say with at least some minimal amount of authority as they put out a sequel 2 years later. In August of 2012, Darksiders 2 hit store shelves. I played a bit of it, got bored a couple of hours in, and just kind of abandoned it. Scathing review that may be in itself, it's not what I would call my style. Not enough fucks and face-fucking jokes crammed into that sentence like it's trying to nail your head to the wall. Overall, outside of my opinions on the matter, the game was well received. In fact, it was received just about as well as its predecessor, though with a few caveats to the game's aspects with a little less polish. Despite its slightly lessened reception, the game became the best-selling title of August, selling just under 250,000 units, and that's a fancy way of writing a number, which I normally would have, but y'all know me. I like to mix things up from time to time. Eventually, and because this became entirely unnecessarily verbose, some shit happened. After that shit happened, Nordic decided it was just about time to remaster the game because remastering games that are less than a decade old is nothing new. In fact, fuck it, let's remaster one that's barely 3 fucking years old. Darksiders 2 Deathinitive Edition hit store shelves and storefronts in 2015. And Jesus Christ, what the fuck is with these people's naming conventions? Boasting a new graphical rendering engine, a couple of tweaks, and all the DLC prepackaged, it promised to look prettier? I don't know what the overall point was. Whatever the purpose may have been, I didn't buy it. And then due to an insane level of cheapness, I eventually did. And then at some point long after, I played it. And I did not enjoy it. This is Darksiders 2, Deathinitive Edition. Darksiders 2 is a mess. It's hard to really drive home just what goes wrong with it on a surface level, at least, as it appears to be quite fine. It does most of what it sets out to do rather well, doesn't it? After all, the reception was quite good. However, THQ publicly stated that the game did not perform to their expectations, and that's an easy enough thing to say. Sony's expectations are insane, and no game they publish will ever meet said expectations. However, they say that with the game selling 1.5 million fucking copies in just 2.5, like a hardcore 3-way featuring a double amputee, fucking months. Let me make this clear. In 83 goddamn days, with pre-orders and post-release sales, the game had successfully sold 1.5 million copies. Fuck you, THQ, you went under because that wasn't up to your expectations. See what we're working with? Insane sales, great reception, zero goddamn longevity, and a major question as to why. And it at least appears simple. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, right? And it's not one that I can break down in my usual rambling sort of way that I somehow managed to stitch together. No! We're going to have to break this one down and focus on elements to really drive home just every little thing that looks fine on the surface, but really drags it down below mediocrity and into just being an intolerable fuckfest. So what can we look at first? Darksiders 1's story was not deep. The call went out, the seals were broken, war came to Earth, and war followed. Only that's not really true. The call was fake, and only most of the seals were broken. War spent 100 years with the writers not being able to decide if he was dead or imprisoned. But then again, dead Cthulhu sleeps, so maybe the difference doesn't exist, and he exists in a quantum super state. What follows is the long tale of what he does to try and redeem himself from the Charred Council, and the story is ever present, constantly playing out, and every step of the way something new happens. The game is also somewhere between 11 and 14 hours long. Darksiders 2 starts us off at an unspecified point during those 100 years wherein we join Death fucking somewhere and seeking out some old bitch who likes birds too much so that we can ask him a couple questions. I'm not sure what the fuck fruit it bears as Death gets into a little fisticuffs with the geriatric, wins, but also loses, gets a phylactery embedded in his chest, and gets dumped onto some random planet. A quick aside, the four horsemen are what are called Nephilim. Biblically speaking, a Nephilim is the spawn of an angel and a human woman. In Darksiders, every single one of them is the spawn of demonic MILF Lilith and drunk Uncle Lester, for all I know. The four horsemen were ordered by the Charred Council to kill all of the other Nephilim, fearing their power and their potential to upset the balance. Death, despite being only one of the four people doing this, gets especially marked with the title Kinslayer and traps their souls in the aforementioned phylactery. We're also actually graced with the names of the horsemen this time, as I don't recall the game having the decency to tell us in the previous endeavor. We've got War, of course, Death, yep, sounds right, Strife because what the fucking fuck, and finally, Fury. You know, no pestilence, no famine, no conquest. Strife, a boy who has guns for some reason, or at least I think he has guns. Maybe in the previous title and this one we get said pistols, so does he have guns? Yes, Strife was named in the last game, actually, but I never found anything referencing who he is, so you know, maybe all this time it really was one man with 6 guns. Anyhow, there's some of that backstory, and now that we know that, we join Death on the planet he was dumped on. It's dying, a heinous corruption is spreading, and Super Dwarf, destroyer of all elves, tells us to go to a place to learn more. And then the story stalls until we do a shitload of quests for people, but it at least serves a purpose to the story, as what we need to do requires us to get to the Super Forge working, except it really doesn't, as the first 2 dungeons that get the Forge working don't have any effect on the last dungeon, which gets us the Super Golem, which we get the activation tools for several hours previous, except we also get activation tools in this dungeon. What? So we do bitch quest for bitch quest purposes. We reach the Tree of Life, which we were led to believe will help us resurrect humanity, that we may absolve War's crimes. Well, when we get there, we find out that the corruption, now spelled with a capital C, is actually the remnants of a Nephilim. A Nephilim that we killed. And his soul is trapped in a phylactery that's embedded in our chest. Okay, whatever, moving on. The story then stalls for 10 hours as we have to do bitch quests for every single person we meet for the most basic of reasons. Need info? Do a quest. Hey, what time is it? Do this quest and I'll tell you. Hey there, guy, let me stop you right there, buddy. Before I can acknowledge your existence, I need at least 3 hours of quests completed. Doing quests for people is the very basis of RPGs, but in the 21 hours I played, only about 6 of those hours involved me playing quests that had fucking anything to do with the story. You're just told to do shit for no reason. So you do it, and the person barely even assists you, your rewards for doing it are fucking nil, and immediately after you're just given another non-story related bitch quest to complete. Fuck my ass running! So we spend some 5 to 6-ish hours doing the first world, which involved activating a forge, activating a golem, of course some explorationing, and also we can get to the tree so we can resurrect humanity. We get to the tree, learn the true nature of the corruption, that we can't just come to the tree and call it easy peasy. Nope, there's gonna be more, and that's okay. That's okay. That's how games usually go. So we enter the Kingdom of the Dead, where everyone goes when they die. Everyone, without exception. We then spend 10 to roughly 12 hours, if you're bad like me, wherein only 1 hour is devoted to actually progressing the story, and the absolute rest of it is somewhere around 9 hours of bitch questing in a lengthy chain of do a quest for me to talk to this person, so that way he can give you another quest to talk to the next person. Imagine you go to a store to buy a cell phone, and in the box is just a turd. So you take the box back and ask what the fuck is going on. The clerk tells you he has no idea, but to find out you need to go do something for him. You do it and come back and he tells you that you'll need to talk to the manager. But in order to find a manager you need to talk to Gary. But he won't tell you where Gary is until you do a second thing. So you do it, and he tells you where Gary is. Gary says you need to talk to Jerry, but he won't tell you where Jerry is until you do a third thing. Then Jerry asks you to do a fourth fucking thing and sends you off to the manager. And the manager won't even give you the fucking time of day until you do 3 more fucking things, each of which involves another 2 sub things, and if you have a fucking problem with any of that, Karen, you can go fuck yourself. Basically, the game is like dealing with tech support. And that's the basic rundown of the Kingdom of the Dead. Keep in mind that while you're doing this, you keep coming across side content, mini dungeons, small traversal puzzles, etc. Now when you encounter them, You can't complete them either due to missing abilities or low level / equipment. Okay, that's normal. But here's the issue. Most of these, you won't find out you can't complete them until you've already wasted an hour or so on them, and most of them you will lack the ability to finish until after you've completed the Kingdom of the Dead. And even after those far too many hours of completing the kingdom, you then get to finish those dungeons, and there's still a bunch more shit surrounding you that you just can't fucking finish. It's not a Metroidvania. It's not even a poor man's Metroidvania like the last game tried to be. It's just one fucking roadblock after another, and in the 21 fucking hours I was able to play, only about 4 were actual dedicated story progression, despite how much of it was linear gameplay. And it's not, oh, well, the other 17 hours were side shit. No, it's not like Oblivion, where I'll clock 115 hours of gameplay into what only actually had 9 hours of main story that was level gated. No, this is drip-fed story. It is front-loaded and roadblocked at every single point of punctuation. It is absolute, unapologetic, unrepentant, tedious horseshittery, and multiple times throughout the game I forgot why I was having to do the thing I was currently doing, even though I always knew that at the forefront I needed to be getting to the tree to absolve war, but due to the massive gaps in the actual story progression, I kept losing track of why I was doing what meaningless menial task I happened to be saddled with at the fucking time. Who the fuck are these legendary people you want me to kill? Oh, you're not going to tell me where they are? Oh, it turns out they're story related only in that I have to kill them as part of the linear portion of the game? So then, what's the fucking point? You didn't flavor the monsters, you didn't add lore to the setting, you just told me to kill a bunch of monsters who I didn't encounter then for 12 more hours, and only knew who they were and was reminded about the quest when, despite in no way actively seeking them out, the quest to kill them got checked off. In literally every other game, when an NPC asks you to kill someone, you either have to find them or they tell you where the target is. Not here, no siree Bob! They're given all this fucking importance and you're told dick all. And then, despite them having zero significance to the story, they're literally just there as the railroad bitch quest. What was the fucking point? Oh, I know, so that after I killed one, the game can arbitrarily turn off fast travel, forcing me to take the slow way back to the Tree of Life, teleport to the Forge Lands, and go all the way over to talk to the fuckstick, so that at level 15 he can give me 400 piddly fucking experience, and with 420 fucking thousand gold and nothing worthwhile to spend it on, you can give me 3,000 gold. Also that the actual purpose of the quest is to once again roadblock story progression, only now actually tricking me into choosing to pad out the game's runtime for the devs. This is shit. It's shit writing from start to bug that prevents me from finishing, and it's all mind-numbingly sprinkled out so goddamn thin that you learn thing that is so important it changes Death's quest, and is then not mentioned at all for 5 more fucking hours. But that's just one slice of bread for the shit sandwich. We need a second, and it's called gameplay. Gameplay is a bit more of a complicated swamp to trudge through and suffers from the same issues that later on The Last of Us would suffer from, i.e. it's just a bunch of popular mechanics from much more popular series mashed into a single game with zero understanding of the pitfalls of each mechanic and absolutely zero refinement. It has the needlessly large and empty map of Twilight Princess. It's got the simplest shit combat from the original God of War. It's got the loot fest of Diablo and Champions of Norath's ilk. It's got the parkour from Prince of Persia. Kind of. It has a leveling system, a skill tree, and to top it all off, it has a combo counter that serves abso-fucking-lutely no goddamn purpose other than to tell you what your current combo is. And all of it is just copy-pasted shit with zero mechanical refinement or even polish, and in many cases lacking any of the depth brought by the games it's stealing from. Combat has improved somewhat. You start with Death's Scythe as your main weapon. It's moderately fast, does moderate damage, soon you start looting secondary weapons. These range from heavy slow attacks to 2 more levels of heavier and slower, with a light fast option that really only amounts to a little more than just a second fast attack. It lacks depth of any kind. Do you want a set of quick attacks, or progressively slower but more powerful attacks? And oh yeah, the differing speeds of the heavy attacks is entirely unnoticeable, making me question if it's even really there. To facilitate this, the game is a dungeon crawling looter type deal. Enemies will drop weapons and armor of differing rarities with a wide range of stat arrays, starting with basic bitch damage, moving into extra damage types to special weapon effects. These weapons have different rarity color codings, with 2 special cases of rarity being possessed and legendary weapons. Legendary weapons come with shitty lore blurbs that mean fucking nothing, as most legendary weapons don't come from bosses or other characters. They will, 99 out of 100 times, have absolutely shit stats compared to what you're currently wielding, but will contain a special property like life drain or mana drain. They're a nice gesture, but aside from just sucking ass, they serve no other purpose than to be burdened with you picking them up and then taking up an extra inventory slot. Possessed weapons are an actually pretty decent mechanic. They start with basic bitch stats, and you feed them loot that you would otherwise be selling, except for legendary weapons. The rarity and power of the weapons determine how much experience it will gain, and even what stat options it will have upon leveling up. With proper planning and item feeding, you can actually build some pretty cool shit and keep cycling a really good ability through multiple new weapons. An example of this was when I got my first life gain on Strike, and was able to continuously cycle that lifesteal into ever more powerful weapons, with each new permutation of the weapon having different special abilities, like going from a life drain hammer to a life drain scythe set that also had 30% crit chance, with 25% extra crit damage, to a super mace that had lifesteal, mana steal, and a massive strength boost, which I don't think the latter actually does anything. Because you have stats in this game, and their levels had no effect on the game that I could notice, just more meaningless numbers to fill up the screen. But where was I? You can feed armor to weapons as well, but if possessed armors exist, I never found any. It's a pretty clever system, and there's always a but, isn't there? And in this case, it's not a finely toned, bouncy butt that makes everybody happy, no. It's a saggy, dumpy little thing that makes everyone sad. You see, while leveling a weapon, I was focusing on crit chance building. It started with none. At first level up, I was able to give it 15%. Next level, I got it up to 18%, then 20%. And then the next level, the game decided that it would be an upgrade to lower the crit chance from 20 to 19%. The game believes that lowering my weapon's stats counts as, and I quote, an attribute enhancement. I want you to sit there and take a moment to consider the level of incompetence it requires for that to either be considered a good idea or to have slipped through unnoticed twice. Your time starts now. Time's up. Pretty fucked, right? Loot drops randomly or procedurally enough to appear random. Enemies can drop potions, armor, weapons, or money, all of which can also come from chests and ambient breakables. Hell, after collecting so many collectathon trash pieces from Vulgrim, you get special keys. These unlock special loot-filled tombs. Tombs which give you trash weapons and armor and more potions than the game allows you to carry, becoming a gigantic fucking waste, as once they spawn and you can't collect them, they're gone forever. Great, you make me trudge across multiple maps just to gain worthless amounts of experience and gold, and now you flood me with loot I can't even collect. Is this some kind of commentary on the throwaway culture of rampant consumerism? I fucking highly doubt it, as that would require some level of competence to implement. So that's the looter crawler gameplay, just a constant flow of worthless loot to justify its own existence, including loot boxes you can buy from Vulgrim. They require a special collectible and tens of thousands of gold, and they only guarantee that you'll get an item of specific rarity. Not that it will be any goddamn good, or even have the potential to outperform what you already have. It's yet another waste. Combat with some slight improvements hasn't overall changed. Delay options have been added to the standard 5-hit combo, but it doesn't add any actual depth, and you still only really have the XXYXX combo that I'm still not sure whether is intentional or not, as I could only really get it to work half the time. They did, however, manage to improve that combat, as I mentioned, with a simple trick. The block button is no longer mapped to the dodge button, because there is no block button anymore. Instead of a parry option, you get the copy-paste perfect dodge, which grants a counterattack that isn't very strong and just throws off whatever combat groove you had going. Did I mention the combat counter? I totally did. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it serves no purpose outside of telling you what your combo is. You don't get better drops from higher combos. You don't get more XP. No better mana regen, nothing. It's just another number amid a sea of numbers that are already flooding the screen. Hardcore parkour is on the platter though, and its mundanity to the highest extent. Even Sands of Time, whose system was experimental and new, allowed the player to improvise with their traversal. There is none of it in Darksiders 2. Short vertical wall run, ledge grab, jump from ledge, pole climbing and jumping, horizontal wall running, jumping to chain wall runs, end of list. Seems simple, Sands of Time didn't have a whole lot of options either. A fucking decade earlier, mind you. What Prince of Persia did do, however, was build their game around it. You could grab any ledge, you could wall run any wall for traversal tricks. In this little aberration, you only get to do what they demand you do at the time they demand you do it. You can't grab any ledge that isn't marked by wood beams, for example. Oh, hello there, Horizon Zero Dawn. That's odd. I was beginning to wonder where Sony got the idea of all their exclusives just copy-pasting other games, and I think we found our culprit. Now, to be clear, you can wall run anywhere, and by that, I mean you can run on any wall. But it's only ever used again when they demand you use it. There's no wall running to find faster ways than the devs set out, nothing like that. Repeat that for every traversal trick. Only when they say, only where they say, and it's highly telegraphed where they want you to go and when they want you to, and the only time it ever gets complicated and requires thought from the player is the one time when they asked me to do it quickly. You know what you call that? Procedural. Monotonous. so procedural and monotonous that I had to start drinking just to try to drag myself through this garbage heap. But there is one more way in which you explore the world, and that is by horse, and thankfully you start with your horse, because the maps are fucking massive and 90% empty. It's why the game has a more robust fast travel feature that it likes to arbitrarily turn off to pad out the runtime. Here's a mental image. I've just entered the Kingdom of the Dead, got my introductory cutscene and have been given my quest marker, and it's halfway down the massive map. So I set off from the tree on my horse because it's going to be a long ride. I don't get anything to see, no eye candy, no side content, nothing to do except just ride, which isn't actually all that much faster than walking. And that's going to be what I have to deal with for half of the travel time. The other half will include me running into things that look like I can do, but only, as previously mentioned, to find out that I can't finish it until I'm done with the goddamn Kingdom of the Dead. Lather, rinse, repeat, emptiness. No sightseeing, nothing to do, no reason to care why I should be going anywhere. Monotony, tedium, mind-numbing drudgery every step of the way. It gets so stupid and bad that there's this spot with a chest. Cool. Now in order to leave, I need to climb a wall, but at the top of the wall is a mob preventing me from climbing up, but the game doesn't allow me to aim up high enough to either shoot them or use my special ability to drag them down and kill them. And again, they've turned off fast travel for I don't know what the fuck reason. Travel, exploration, parkour, combat, looting, it's all copy-pasted, lacking all of the refinements of games that they were taken from and learning none of those lessons the games taught us. Specifically, let's talk about dungeons. All dungeons are the same. Basic traversal tricks that you gotta figure out which to use and when that are also highly telegraphed. But each dungeon you get one ability or item that will let you traverse that dungeon. And then just like Twilight Princess, you never use outside of that dungeon. Except for maybe a couple of super secret loots littered throughout the world. That's it. The exact same designs for every dungeon, just like with Twilight Princess, learning nothing from its predecessors. The shit sandwich is nearly complete, children. We just need some meat slabs, maybe some veggies, and a couple of condiments.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Derivative.
It's not all bad, as there is a silver lining to the little cloud. This game is held up pretty well by its art direction. The previous entry suffered from a nasty juxtaposition where you'd have the stylized elements in realistically portrayed settings. Well, luckily they decided to go with a more pervasive stylization this time around, and everything flows together quite nicely. Nobody stands out like a sore thumb, and I'm not constantly staring at World of Warcraft characters in Times Square. I think it's very fair to say that the art direction went a very long way to help the game, but despite going a long way, it doesn't do a whole lot. In the Forge Lands, your first two dungeons consist of turning on a lava flow and turning on a water flow. They have highly opposed designs, with one taking on a more industrial look, and the water dungeon functioning like turning on aqueducts with a brighter color palette. And after the third dungeon and into the Kingdom of the Dead, everything is grey for 11 fucking hours and it's shit! And all that work that went into making things stand out just starts falling by the wayside. The soundtrack is improved from the last game. Blaring trumpets and epic stings with no oomph are replaced by a more fantasy fanfare. It's more thematic in its use of instrumentation and it's a lot better. It's nice that they were managing to get some things right, but it's a shame they couldn't get them right enough. And a lot of them fall apart due to the game's overall performance. The game is jank. For parkour, you don't have a dedicated button. No, instead, to initiate a wall run, you just jump at a wall, with your angle determining whether you go vertical or horizontal. Unfortunately, the detection is awful, and if your angle is a pixel too wide, you jump off a cliff. And if it's a pixel too narrow, you just run straight up it. God help your controller's detection. The graphical engine has serious issues loading shadows for some unexplainable reason. Sometimes all of the sound will just disappear, requiring you to restart the game. Gaining experience while having to talk to someone can trigger a level up prompt, which can happen often, as talking to people is usually how quests end, forcing level ups in the middle of a cutscene, causing the game to crash or softlock. Or, and this one is fun, the parameters for a puzzle can just be broken, causing you to be unable to complete the game. Because I couldn't complete the game. You see, I'm here in a late-ass dungeon. I think it's one of the last, if not the last, and since ripoffs are always in order, it requires time shenanigans like multiple Zelda dungeons. I have an ability to split my soul in two, and each soul can move a set distance from the statue that is formed. I take Soul 1 to a portal and open it. I leave Soul 1 there, and move on to Soul 2. Soul 2 has to go through a platforming puzzle and some combat, and then activate another portal. Soul 2 must then throw a bomb through the portal to Soul 1. But Soul 1 refuses to load. It's incorporeal. The game will not register Soul 1 as being there, so I restart the game. I spend an hour looking for an alternative. I look up the solution just to find out I was right all along. I restart the game again. I back up my save and reinstall. It's broken. I can't complete the puzzle, thus I can't finish the dungeon, thus I can't complete the game. Sweet fucking mercy, the nightmare ends itself. The cosmic horror turns its attention to me, shrugs and says, "You know what? Today's your lucky day. No more madness, no crushing weight of infinitude, nothing. Be free." And that's a shit sandwich. I can't recall all of the bugs I encountered, and I'm not even going to try to go even through half of the list of the game-breaking bugs that are mentioned in the Steam forums. That's just it. I can't go any further, and I have to be done with the game. Darksiders 2 Deathinitive Edition is not worth the $5 I paid for it, and the first title, and for some reason, the first title unremastered. It's a massive copy-paste of functions and features, and all of them lack any soul, polish, or even an option for the player to express themselves through gameplay. Story is stilted and roadblocked. Maps are massive and filled with things you can't do, which makes them monotonous and tedious. Gameplay is simplistic and procedural and filled to the brim with constant numbers. Leveling and skills don't add enough to the combat to improve the gameplay, and artistic direction is nice, but nice is as good as it ever gets. It's simply not worth it. Even at the $5, there's just too much good stuff out there, even at that price to play. It's a slog so goddamn awful I had to add rum to my playtime just to trudge through it, and the only mercy the game could grant me was that at some point it decided to harakiri and put me out of my misery. I'm the TheNecroswanson, and somehow they made more of this shit!